Hello, everyone. Today's topic focus on virtues, not on mistakes or on defects. One of the tendencies that the human mind has developed over time and which present-day society is a bit stuck in is this tendency to focus on what is not right, what we lack, what we're missing, what is mistake. And it is not about that we are ignoring what is wrong, but it is completely out of balance. No, just look at yourself. And in a day, there are many things that you are doing. And maybe one or two things you are doing wrong, or one or two things that you're making a mistake. What will you continue to think about? What will you continue at the end of the day remember? That one thing or those two things that didn't go so right or that you made a mistake. But all those, maybe even hundreds of things that you did, many interactions you had that went right, you don't pay attention to, you don't give yourself credit for, you don't remember that. And we do this not only with ourselves, we do this with others also. Others are a world in themselves. And there are so many aspects and dynamics to them. But they do one thing wrong or two things wrong, and that is what we will remember. And that is what we store in our mind, and that is what we project upon them again and again and again and again. And they might have even worked on themselves, they might have even changed, they might have forgotten, but we tend to focus on that. Now, one of the beautiful practices in a journey of self-development and definitely in a spiritual journey is to begin to focus on virtue, to begin to focus on what is good, to begin to focus on what is valuable and enriching and empowering. And we all know that if someone points out your good qualities, if someone highlights what you did well, how empowering that is, how good you generally feel. And it can even become a basis of some form of respect. And this is a very simple practice, but we have created this mindset where we as if almost like trapped and obsessed in seeing mistakes, in seeing defects, in seeing what is wrong. Not the simple thing like public transport, the bus system, the train system, the subway system. Here in New York City, it is such an intricate system. It is amazing, and it transports millions and millions and millions of people. And it can bring you everywhere, all over New York City in a few minutes. If you had to walk there or if you had to take the bicycle, it would take you forever, and some places you can't reach. We don't highlight all of that. I did nothing to contribute to that public transport system. But when they are late, or when there is some rerouting or we are ready to criticize. And when somebody brings up the topic of public transport, everybody shake their head. Oh, how horrible it is, and how this and how that. But how much benefit we get from it. Every day it brings us all over. Every day it brings millions of people all over. And your life and your comfort and the fact that we have groceries, the fact that we can do everything It's partly because of the transportation system that is there, but we are ready to judge and condemn and point out the mistakes, and that is what we keep in our mind, instead of having a feeling of gratitude and a feeling of good wishes for all the people involved in that system to try and make it work, and make it work conveniently and comfortably for so many of us. And these are very simple, superficial things to point out. But if we constantly everywhere only see mistakes and defects and focus on that, how miserable is the state of our mind? How miserable is the state of our heart? Because we are living with our own thoughts all the time. We are living with the feelings that we are generating. And imagine you're living with people, or maybe you don't have to imagine, you're living with people, and all the time you're only aware of what they're not doing, or of what they're not doing right, of what their mistakes or their defects. Then that becomes my biggest defects, only seeing defects all over the place. How miserable I make my life, just through my thinking, and just through what I'm focused on. Just through how I am conditioning my mind to pick up defects, to spot what is wrong. Every person is a whole world, and there are many qualities. But if we approach it from a spiritual angle, from a spiritual perspective, it is even deeper. Everyone behind the physical personality, behind all the actions performed, behind all the roles that we play, behind there is a spiritual being. And that spiritual being is innately a being of peace, a being of love, a being of freedom. That being is innately, in potential, divine. And not only they, also myself. And if I learn to focus on what is constructive, learn to remind myself to focus that there is always a bigger picture. Bigger picture in the sense of broad, but also in depth. There is something behind. There is something beyond. If I learn to see that bigger picture, that whole picture, maybe even that spiritual perspective, how much more pleasant will be my inner world and my thoughts? How much more will I enrich my life? And with that, how much more will I be able to enrich and empower others? And it is such an easy thing. We can just choose to not focus on defects. And it is not that you are blind. You may be aware, but let us be aware of the total picture. There is no one in this world who doesn't have not a single quality that is positive. There is no one in this world who is only useless and filled with defects, and definitely in our surroundings. Let us pick up virtues from ourselves, from others, and change that mindset. Begin to see the value in things and the quality that people bring with them. And then you nurture that. And you may be aware of what is not right or not so virtuous, but you don't focus on that. And you don't store that in your mind. You don't store that in your heart, contaminating and poisoning your own mind and your own heart. And if you're really serious, you take up this practice of meditation. And meditation is the conscious choice to create thoughts based on spiritual truth about self, about others, about life. You see the bigger picture, you see the spiritual nature of everyone which is innately good and innately beautiful. We are all our souls, children of God. We have as if God's DNA, all of us, with potential of peace, with potential to be blissful, with potential to unconditionally love. And more we begin to acknowledge that in the self, we can also acknowledge that in others, and we begin to nurture that. We are just playing out parts here, and we are trapped in spiritual ignorance. That is why things come out not so virtuous sometimes, or sometimes even outright negative or destructive. But it all comes because of ignorance. Misery and sorrow is because of spiritual ignorance. So let us begin to focus on virtue and not focus on defects. And let's take a few minutes for some meditation. And in this meditation, just become aware that there is this physical body, that there is a physical personality, which is like the part that we are acting out. But the one who is giving life to this body, the one who is playing the part, the one who is experiencing everything, is this invisible being of consciousness, the soul, an immortal, timeless being of light. And just play with this and hold this in the mind instead of thinking about defects or past and childhood and body and people around. Just fill your mind with this image of a tiny star, a being of consciousness, aware, but bodiless, genderless, a spiritual being, innately free, pure, peaceful, godlike in potential, child of the Supreme. And this being, one aspect of this being is we like to play. And so this body is like a toy. We come to play the game of human life. But we transcend the game. We existed before this body took shape. And we will continue to exist after this body perishes. We're like travelers, timeless, living beings of light, free. Play with these thoughts and these feelings and shift your sense of self from being a mortal being with defects to a spiritual being of light with higher potential. And hold this vision also for others. Focus on virtue. Don't contaminate your heart and your mind with defects. You are aware of them, but you learn from them and you take the lesson and move on. Thank you. Enjoy the journey of discovering and seeing virtue.